This is working. Hey everybody, hi. I'm new to Twitch, so I'm Maddie. Thanks for coming to the stream, and we're going to be sketching some creature bust today. You can chat to me. You probably have done this more than I have, the Twitch stream, that is. So, oh good, great, you can hear and see me. Hello, good afternoon. It is a very hot London afternoon. Very fun to be here. You get to see the bookcase behind me and my desk. And hopefully you'll have ZBrush up on the screen here. I see there's like an infinite window here because I've got the window up so I can see the messages. But hello everybody. Hello. Awesome. So let's get started. I am just going to ideate. I'm just going to sketch. I thought it would be fun for the first time just to grab a sphere and create some kind of a creature bust with it. Since I think it's one of the best ways to learn ZBrush, one of the best ways to practice, break habits, create new shapes, get accustomed to making new shapes, is to do sphere sketches. Literally just going into your light box, grabbing a polysphere, and using it as that virtual ball of clay. So we'll just draw it on the canvas and go into edit mode. A couple things. I always use the basic material too. I never ever use any of the other materials for sculpting. The reason for that is if you were to use something like the matte cap gray material, it's a very attractive material. It looks really good, but it has a tendency to hide the little imperfections in your mesh. So if you've got, for example, a little indentation or a bump, it's easier to miss it using matte cap gray. However, if you use basic material too, it has that nice specular shine. It gives you a highlight, a mid-tone, and a core shadow. So it's really unforgiving. And if you can make something look good under basic material too, which is a blend shader essentially, it's very unforgiving. If you make it look good under that, it'll look good under any material that you decide to use. So I'm going to have to get accustomed to sort of alt-tabbing over here to see any sort of messages, because I've only got my laptop. I don't have a second monitor to view the messages on. Morning. Thanks for the welcome. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for helping me get set up. Cool. The loop at Ben's time. Oh, there's a delay. That's so weird. Cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and start as I normally would, which is just taking the move brush and turning on asymmetry and creating kind of an egg shape for a head. I really don't know where I'm going with this. I don't have any preconceived ideas. I just thought it would be fun to get on and sketch something and hope it looks good. So I do a lot of teaching too, and I always joke with the students in my gnomon class that, when you're doing a demo, in the back of your head, I'll admit it, you're always thinking to yourself, oh, don't suck, don't suck. It's a little exciting too. So it's the funny thing, it's getting on and just showing your thought process, showing how you do stuff. It's kind of fun. And I don't have any, like I said, I don't have a real, I've got a couple ideas in my head that I was thinking about on the train home today that I thought would be kind of cool, but I don't have a real clear-cut impression of where I'm going just yet. I was thinking that it'd be funny, that's a funny way to start because there's a running joke. So I do creature and character design for film. I work at Double Negative in London in the art department, and before that I was at Weta Digital, and before that I was at Weta Workshop. And consistently the joke is always, whenever you're getting a script and reading a script and it's got a monster in it, you buzz through the script and you read it, and then you get to the monster part, you're like, okay, great, I've got to get some ideas from the script, and it says, and they turn the corner, and there's the monster, and it's always this phrase, like nothing you've ever seen before. So, the screenwriter's sitting there going, yeah, it's going to be amazing. So every script you get, it always says, like nothing you've ever seen before, which is funny because people think they want something that they've never seen before, but they really do have a preconceived notion of what they do want to see. They want to see because we've got a visual vocabulary of all the cool creatures and animals and things that we've seen. Specifically creatures. We have a visual vocabulary of just all the stuff that's influenced us over the years, and a lot of times that creeps into things. It's funny, you'd be working on a movie, and then another big movie would come out. Like I was working on a movie about the time that 300 came out, and then the next weekend or the next week at work, we knew it. The folks came in and they're like, "Oh, can we make it look more like 300?" So it's funny. The way we're influenced by what we see. That's why a lot of times I look for inspiration. Like the art I tend to look at isn't necessarily fantasy art. I think my favorite artists are the symbolists. I like the symbolist movement a lot, which, if you like surrealism, you probably like symbolism. It's sort of a proto-surrealism. It's late 19th, earliest 20th century. It draws a lot on mythology, so you get a lot of really cool kind of mythological characters and creatures and dreamscapes in it. It's real inspiring stuff. And of course I like looking at, other designers, and I like looking at, the really, really talented, amazing people out there, but just saying, I always try and look at other sources. So I'm just sort of sketching something, and I haven't even done Dynamesh yet, so I'm going to go ahead and do geometry and Dynamesh, and we'll turn on Dynamesh. And I'll say, no, I don't want to freeze my subdivision levels, because I never do that. Don't like freezing subdivs. I have my own way of bouncing back and forth between subdivision surfaces and Dynamesh. So I don't like the way the freezing subdivision levels kind of changes your lower sub-D. I think I get better results when I just project and do it manually. So I'm going to pull a neck out of here, mask out where I want the neck to come from, and take the move brush and pull that neck down. And smooth this back a bit, going with my clay tubes brush. I love the clay tubes brush. It's absolutely my favorite brush for sculpting. Because I think because I come from a background of clay sculpting, I've been sculpting in clay since I was little, and I sculpted professionally for years before I did 3D. I really like the organic and loose way it adds form to the surface. I just like the way it works, the way it doesn't have a very sort of parametric and really 3D kind of feel to it. So, if you turn on the alpha too, I typically turn the alpha off. You might notice I don't have the alpha turned on for that brush, just because it makes it a little less noisy and aggressive. But early on in a sculpture like this, we'll make it aggressive. I'm putting in the clavicles and the sternocleidomastoid. Clavicles should look like handlebars, literally. My anatomy during college, when we were doing the shoulder girdle, the first beginning of class, he comes into class and gets in the back of the skeleton and grabs the clavicles and pretends to bicycle the skeleton around the room, and it really stuck in my head that they really are shaped like that. You have 1/3, second third, and then a third there. And they're in a little zigzag shape, so they don't go straight across. And we'll get this nice column of muscle coming down the neck here. Some occipital back there at the base of the skull. With a nice masseter here. Masseter muscle being that big jaw muscle that crushes and pulls the jaw shut. So I'm just sort of sketching in sort of a big jawline here. Being very, very loose, very gestural. I'm not worried about being too specific or anything. I'm going to spread the eyes out, bring the cheekbones out a bit. And take the clay tubes brush and sort of trace up the temporal ridge of the skull. Temporal ridge being right there. You can feel it if you touch your skull and clench your jaw. You'll feel where the muscle grabs onto the skull there. That's the temporal ridge. And a little zygomatic arch there. Sketch that in. We're going to put an ear here eventually, so let's go ahead and make a little shape for that. I don't like the ears being that low. I'm going to undo that. Clear my mask, and I'm going to put the ears up a bit higher. And I'm just going to put a shape here, and oops, I'm going to go back before I cleared that mask. So I'm going to put a shape here, execute Dynamesh, and then move away from it. I'm trying to move around a lot. I don't want to get stuck on any particular area just yet. I want to be just sort of working real quickly and gesturally and loosely. From the side view here, I'm going to rotate the entire character. So it's got more of a forward thrust to the shoulders. The shoulders are back and the head's thrust forward. Build up a little muzzle here. Cheekbones. I'm going to take my move brush, and also being sure to look at the figure from the underside and the top, look at it from a lot of different angles. It's one of the really nice things about working in 3D that you don't get if you're working in clay. If I wanted to look at my sculpture from this angle, you'd have to get on the floor if we were working on a physical sculpture. But we can just really easily move stuff around, and I always try and remember to do that, to move around the shapes and work into them, constantly moving around them. And I'm just sketching in some flow here. These aren't going to be finished wrinkles or anything. I'm just kind of sketching the flow of flesh and muscle around the head. Back to my clay tubes brush, build up that masseter. And I want to bring that snout forward. Bring these cheekbones up. And then let's build up the traps here. And just taking the standard brush and just going to sort of play around with the shapes of the jaw here and the mouth. And give a little nasolabial fold here. Take the standard brush and build up the wings, the nostrils there, and just be thinking about the shapes of that nose. Whoa, that's too much. The tubes, bring it up to here. Boom, boom, boom. Down. That brow line there. That cheekbone. Execute Dynamesh. I want to accentuate this jaw. So I'm thinking that the jaw is sort of like a half statement. It's not saying anything, it's just sort of there. And I think you know, an interesting design needs to have a statement or two or three, probably not more than three. So I just want to do something else with this jaw here. So I'm going to take my move brush and give a real pronounced underbite and a very pronounced angle to the mandible here. I just want this to be a statement. I want the jaw to actually say something. And we'll invert that mask, and then let's tuck in, there we go, that's kind of neat. Bring this down. Put some teeth in here before long, but for right now I think that's pretty cool. And I want to do something to the silhouette up here at the top of the head. I'm going to bring this forward. Something that's a nice trick is if you change your material to the flat color material, you can look at your work in silhouette while you're working, and it strips away all the shaded detail, all the form, and lets you just judge your silhouette. Just look at your overall outline, which is really important that that works before any of the internal forms. I like to have a little break there. That's a neat happy accent right there. I'm kind of keen on that. I'm going to take my damn standard brush and just sort of maybe accentuate that. Take my clay tubes brush, build up this nasal structure through here. That's interesting. I kind of like what just happened there. Cool. Some teeth in here in just a moment. I'm going to come back down here. I don't want to get stuck in the face and think about the pectoralis muscle here. Maybe I will add a little bit more structure here. I'll do B for brush, I for insert. And go to IMMB parts and just grab the torso. And just move this back and scale it up. Oops, wrong button. Scale it up. Move down. Take the move brush. I'm going to change the proportions of the head to the body here in a second. You'll notice I make sound effects while I work. I think that's important. I think that's beneficial for good work habits. Shoop, 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 shoop. There we go. And we'll just dynamesh these two bits together. And take my move brush. Just want it a little bit more. And I should save my work at this point, because ZBrush will sometimes save the file for you, or it will save the file for you, but it's really good to make sure that you're also saving on your own. So, monster, that's creative, 01. Yeah, I mean, ZBrush has the auto save, but you don't want to completely rely on that. And make sure that you're also saving on your own. I gotta say that autosave is amazing, because I used to lose work so much when I would forget to save, or I'd have a system crash, and it's just saved my butt so many times ever since that was introduced, and gosh, it's been a few versions now. So I'm just thinking about the rib cage really quickly, bringing it out into a little bit of a crest there. Which is kind of something rather simian. See how I'm gorillas, kind of a crested rib cage where it sort of comes out. It's very narrow and comes out in a ridge in the front. There's something that we did on the orcs and Hobbit. Let's try and bring that rib structure in there. A lot of times when I'm sculpting bodies and form and stuff, I don't worry about getting the muscles absolutely correct as I'm sketching. I just sketch them in the right direction, make sure that they're going from the right point of origin to the right point of insertion, and I don't get caught up in it. I want to continue working and moving around. So I think a lot of times it's really easy to sort of get lost and frustrated in anatomy and trying to make it perfect. I mean, that's a noble endeavor. I love anatomy, and I love the study of anatomy. I did cadaver lab. I'm passionate about it, but it's also possible to over-obsess about it and not allow yourself to loosen up and still be gestural. You let it inform your work, but don't get stuck in an area because you're obsessing about whether or not you've got the muscle exactly where it needs to be, because it is a process. It's a development, it's an evolution, and it'll find the right place. You'll get it there. Another interesting thing too is the armpit. A lot of times people forget to make the armpit pretty deep. Oops. The armpit's pretty deep. Like if you were to hold your arm out and then like grab like your pectoralis and touch, like put your middle finger on the top of your humerus and put your thumb so you're touching like up into your armpit, you can feel pretty much the bottom of your humerus. You can feel that the arm actually doesn't have an enormous amount of attachment to your torso. You have the muscles of the front, the pectoralis muscles. You've got the muscles of your back, which are the teres major and minor, and the supraspinatus and infraspinatus on the scapula. So those are all just the muscles of your shoulder girdle, and they're basically just the front and back wall of your armpit. So people often, they'll think about the arm as being this big trunk that attaches to the body, and it's not really like that. So kind of thinking about that can be useful. I mean, that's what I'm thinking about right here. I'm just trying to get some, just using the clay tubes brush with a negative value to push this in. And I'm going to mask, oh shoot, wrong. There we go. I'm going to mask, not erase. Mask the head, and I'm going to change the proportion of the head to the body. I should alt-tab over and see if there's any things. There should be... Yes, it's good to have quick save sets every few minutes. Tuatara NZ, is there a Kiwi in here with me? I'm using an Intuos 4 for anybody who was asking. This is just an Intuos 4. Awesome, cool. Tuatara, New Zealand. Hello, New Zealand. Bet it's cold there right now. New Zealand. I lived in New Zealand for 10 years, and it's a beautiful place. I have permanent residency here, and I consider myself almost Kiwi at this point. But I live in London now. I love London. I adore London. New Zealand's a great place to live. I can't be completely Kiwi because I still don't like rugby. My first job, when I went to Weta Workshop, got off the plane, and I went to work the next day. I have a long-standing habit of flying across the planet, sleeping for half a day, and then getting up and going to work the first day. So I go to work the first day, and The Hobbit hasn't really gotten off the ground yet. It's a Guillermo del Toro film at the time that I got there. And or when I started, it was a Guillermo del Toro film, and he was out of the country working on something at the time, so they didn't have anything yet to really start on. But they had this one project, which was the Rugby World Cup Monument, which is still down by the waterfront in Wellington, New Zealand. So they needed help sculpting the whatchamacallit, the maquette for that. So I did all this masking and didn't bother to change my body size. So like I had never seen rugby before, and you know I was sculpting this rugby player, and there were people that were genuinely like, you know, somebody who really appreciates rugby should do this, because people are serious about their rugby. Nothing wrong with that. Just I never got it. So there we go. I want to change that proportion of the head to body there. And take my move brush and pull this bit forward, pull the chest forward. Everyone's freaking out over football here now. I was sitting at a cafe after work having a coffee with a friend, and all of a sudden I heard what sounded like all of central London screaming, which was scary. It was really terrifying, but it turned out like somebody had scored a goal. Sports ball! That's great. So I'm using my clay toothbrush here just to work into that recessed area. I'm going to undo that a few times so you can see this. There's this deep indentation there, and one of the things I really like about clay tubes is if I run it down into an indentation, it fills it in nicely. And doesn't really destroy the form, it just sort of fills that in, which is really handy. I'm going to take my clay toothbrush and need to fill out the under portion of the throat here, where your sort of trachea would be, and the windpipe, and the muscles in the neck and everything. There should be sort of a triangular wedge of form in here that I want to get in there. There we go. And let's build up the back of this head here. So I did, there we go. I take my move brush, sort of scooch this forward. It's probably about time to start putting some thought into some teeth and eyeballs here. So it'd be nice to put something in there for the eyes. So I'm going to smooth out little sketchy bits that I did inside these eye sockets. And I am going to go to my light box. I'm going to save my work. Save my work. Save as, and we'll call it Monster 02. Now I'm going to go to the light box, and I'm going to open up another polysphere. And that takes that polysphere and it places it in the tool palette here. Which means I can go to my subtool palette now, go back to the head, and I can append, and there will be a polysphere here that I can grab. So I'll grab that polysphere, and it's sitting inside the head right now, so I'll do transpose, move it off to the side, scale it down, oops, not rotate, scale it down, and we'll place it in the eye socket. There we go. I like the idea of it being kind of a little sort of beady eye. I often do things that have rather big eyes, so I like the idea of this being a little eye. So here, I've got the eye there. I'm going to go back to the head now, and I'm going to turn on transparency so I can see through that sphere. I'm going to take the clay tubes brush and zoom in, and I'm going to build up all the faces underneath that sphere so they're sitting on the outside of it. Basically, I'm trying to sculpt the head so it's coming outside of the eyeball. All right, like that. So if we turn off transparency, you see I've just sculpted all that geometry to sit in front of that sphere. Okay. Now, make sure I've got my asymmetry turned on. Okay, I do. Now I'm going to take my masking brush, and I'm going to mask the shape of an open eye. I'm going to start with the medial canthus right here. It's typically called the tear duct. There's a medial canthus and a lateral canthus. The lateral canthus is the outside corner, the medial canthus is the inside corner. And you can remember that because medial is always medial, and lateral is always lateral. Lateral, medial. Anatomical names sound complicated, but they're not. They're just Latin words for really like stupid descriptions. It's always like lateral, superior, inferior. It's just ways of saying left, right, up, and down. So we're going to mask out the shape of an open eye. It's all in Latin because European medicine had all these doctors that were all speaking different languages, so they standardized it all to be in Latin. So a doctor from Prussia could talk to a doctor from Gaul, and they could communicate. So we're going to take the move brush now, and I'm going to push those faces in, revealing that sphere. I'm going to bring that eyeball forward now. It's sitting a bit too deep back there. Bring that forward, go back to the sculpture, and we'll smooth this back and start to shape this eyelid. So I'll bring this up, and over, bring this down. And I just want to make this eye conform to the sphere of the eye. I'm going to mask the lower lip, bring this out, lower lid, not lip, bring this up. And I like having it sort of tilted in an angle. It's kind of cool. I like that. It gives a bit of malicious intent. Malicious intent is something that would come up a lot in creature design, especially with you know, when you've got something like an orc or a monster or a snarly character. A big challenge would be to communicate malicious intent without having to make it snarl. So a lot of times if I'm designing something scary, I try and make it scary even if it's not frowning. So it's default, it's got resting monster face. So the overall impact of the character is that it has malicious intent. It's dangerous, it's scary. It doesn't have to make a scary face to say, hey, I'm scary. So by tilting that eye at that angle, that extreme angle, it's going to play off the brow here and I think give a nice kind of feel. So, cool, I'm going to grab this eyeball, I'm going to save, because I'm about to run the mirror script for Subtool Master, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to go to Z plugin, Subtool Master, Mirror, and we're going to merge it into one subtool across the x-axis. There we go, so now we've got two eyeball spheres. Go back to the head. That's nice, that feels better. There's something to look at. There's some sense of gaze there. Too much information. Cool. Oh, Twitch doesn't archive the videos. Oh, that's good. YouTube does. Cool. The lion head from the creature character book. Oh man, that was, that's so awesome. That was your first sculpture. Yay, I'm glad you got the books. I love doing the books. I always think about it, all the worst people, murders and other fakes, look like irregular. That's true. Like, in the real world, monsters don't look like monsters. There's no way to spot them. But luckily, we're doing fantasy, and we can have fun with it. See, I've always loved monsters. I was actually, I just recently came back from the framer. I got this thing back from the frame shop. So when I was little, I mean like really little, like 6 or 7 years old, and my mom would pick me up from elementary school and come home. She'd say, there's a surprise in your bed. And I'd go up to my bedroom and there'd be these little like glow-in-the-dark monster stickers on my bed. And I stuck those on everything. I loved monsters. I had a little t-shirt that says, I love monsters. And I always thought the monsters were my friends. I was on their side, you know? So it's like, I wasn't scared of them. I figured, you know, Dracula and the Wolfman and me, we would hang out, you know, we're buddies. It's like, I get them. And I love that. I think Guillermo del Toro has a similar feeling about monsters that he's talked about. That he's passionate about them and loves them and their humanity. The monsters bring us closer to our humanity. Fantasy monsters. I'm just building up the temporalis muscle here, which is, like I was saying about the masseter muscle right here. These are the two muscles of mastication or crushing. So the bigger these are, the more powerful something's jaw is. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the skull of predators, the skulls of predators, if you look at a lion skull or a bear skull, you'll see the surface area of this portion of the jaw is really big to compensate for that crushing muscle there, the masseter. And then you've got the area up here, the temporalis, and this area will be quite pronounced on the skull as well, and that's for the temporalis muscle, which grabs on the side of the skull and then dips down on the inside of the jaw. So the masseter pulls the outside of the jaw, the temporalis muscle pulls the inside, and that's what crushes your jaw shut. Which is why if you sort of grit your teeth in your sleep, you'll get a headache. Maybe that muscle will be sore. So I want to fill out that hollow at the temporal ridge there with a little bit of muscle there. We need to come back to those ears pretty soon. I think I might give him, I don't know, I might raise the ears up and make them kind of sort of pit bull-like. I don't know. Still thinking about this. I'm still kind of exploring. What I really love about sculpting and designing is not having a plan and exploring. Unless it goes badly and it's not working, and then it can be a bit of like crap. But if you're enjoying it and you've got the time, I really like the exploration, the ideation process. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that some of you have seen my books. I do have my books, and then I also have I have a 14-hour introduction to ZBrush DVD, well, video series at the Gnomon Workshop. So I've taught at Gnomon for, golly, 13 years now? Since 2006. However long ago 2006 was. So I teach there, and then I also do the video training for ZBrush there. And I love doing demos. I love doing classes and showing workflow. It's a lot of fun. I always feel like you don't really understand something until you can explain it to someone else, until you can explain what you're doing and why. So I would always get very frustrated in school if I would ask a question and someone would say, just do it. And I would get very frustrated in art school. I would say, how do you paint skin? And they'd say, well, just do what I do. Or you just use these colors. And they wouldn't tell me an exact methodology for how you would paint skin. And I believe that you can explain anything. You can explain anything in a clear-cut manner. Sometimes it's not as complicated as you might think it is. So one time I met when I was 20. I went to Los Angeles for the first time, and I met my hero, very, very famous makeup effects artist who's just one of the greatest artists who's ever lived. And I remember asking him, how do you paint skin to look so real? And he said, well, I just put paint on it until it looks right. And I was real shy at the time, and I was like, oh, I think he's making fun of me. That can't be the right answer. So I went away a little bit dejected and felt like, well, that was rather rude. And then years later, when I'm in school and I finally kind of worked out painting skin, I realized that's the right answer. That's what you do. You put color on until it looks right. I mean, it's a little more involved than that, of course, but that's sort of the simplest explanation. A lot of times, you can pretend like you can try and overcomplicate your explanation, but sometimes it is about exploration. Sometimes it is about trial and error, not being afraid to make changes to things. So I'm just going to execute Dynamesh here really quickly and save my work. 4. And I was just tinkering around with the nose and the nasolabial folds there, and the mouth. We're going to have to come in here and put some teeth in a second. I'm kind of avoiding that for right now for some reason. I'm going to go back to my clay tubes brush, build up that sternocleidomastoid. Now the sternocleidomastoid muscle on a very fit, very muscular person is kind of like a big thick ribbon. And it starts at the mastoid process, the little bumps at the back of your ears. That's the mastoid part. And then it wraps around the cylinder of your neck like a ribbon, and then comes down and it connects to your sternum, the sterno, and the clavicle. So there's 2 heads here. So you've got the sternal head right here, which is the one that grabs the sternum, and then it forks off here and that grabs the clavicle. And typically there's a little hollow right here. Oop, that's too big. Go back to my standard brush, alpha 1, and subtract. So there's usually, there we go, like a little hollow right there. I'm going to knock this back with a smooth brush. And I'm going to take my clay toothbrush. I'm going to turn that alpha off. I kept that alpha on much longer than I normally would just because I'm talking and I forgot it was on. I typically keep that alpha turned off after the first 5 minutes of the sculpture. 7th cervical vertebrae. Just sketching in the spine here. Take my move brush, let's pull the lats out. Bring this out. I'm going to go away from my normal brushes here. I'm going to grab the magnify brush and just sort of magnify the shoulders here. Typically the brushes that I use are, and you'll see them change, I have them hotkeyed. I use the move brush, which I have hotkeyed to the number 1. I use the standard brush, which I have hotkeyed to the number 2. The inflate brush, which is number 3, and clay tubes, which is number 4, and then number 5 is damn standard. Those are the 5 brushes that I use for just about everything I do. Not taking into account maybe the insert mesh brushes or vector displacement brushes, but for the most part, like 90% of what I do with just those brushes. So from the front, looking at the overall silhouette, it needs ears now. We've got to get back to these ears. So let's talk about ears for a little bit. I really love sculpting ears. And I think ears are really easy to do once you understand the individual parts of them. I think people get real intimidated by ears because they're so complicated. They appear to be so complicated, but they're really simple. They're a simple grouping of shapes if you understand how they're put together. So I'm turning off the gizmo and I'm going to draw a transpose rotate line here. And I'm going to rotate that ear out just a bit like this, and out a bit like this. Just want to tinker around with this shape here. Smooth that back. Don't like how big that is, so I'm going to go back to my move. And there we go, that feels better. That feels better. That sort of fits the rest of the form right now. It's a little bit more squat. So I'm going to take my clay tubes brush, knock back that transition into the head here. And let's talk about ears. Ears are easy. Ears, you just have to break them down into individual pieces. So the first one that we're going to think about is the outermost rim of the ear here. This is called the helix. This is the bit of cartilage that goes all the way around from the earlobe, all the way up to here, and then dips down inside the ear. So we'll do that part in a second. I'm going to take the inflate brush and kind of inflate this out. Take the move brush and scooch this out a bit. And, what did I just do? Undo that. I want to do the pinch brush. There we go. I'm just going to pinch that into a little point there. There we go. So that's going to be the helix. That's the outermost ring of the ear there. I'm going to take the standard brush, and I'm going to do what's called the conch of the ear, which is the deepest part right here that goes down inside the ear. The helix here actually steps down, has a little ramp that goes down into the ear there. That's called the leg of the helix. So it actually dips down inside the conch of the ear, that big hole inside the ear. And then deep down inside the conch, there's the actual hole of the ear itself. That's called the auditory meatus. That's where the cavity goes inside the ear canal. Now there's a little nubbin of skin right there that protects that hole in your ear so spiders don't grow in or don't crawl inside that. Don't think about that while you're going to sleep tonight. So let's go back to our standard brush, control, mask pen. Mask pen? Where are you, mask pen? No. Mask pen. There you are. And mask that out, invert that mask, take the move brush, and we're going to pull this little nubbin forward, smooth it back, pull it forward. That's called the tragus. That's this little bit right here. If you take your finger and plug your ear, the piece of skin that you're pressing, that's the tragus. So we'll bring that forward. So we have the helix, the tragus. Now watch this. Right next to the tragus, there's another little bump. That's called the antitragus. Everything in the ear is either a thing or anti that thing. So there's tragus, then antitragus. Now here, inside the helix of the ear, we've got this second bit of form, which you'll recognize because it's got kind of a Y shape to it. So if I invert the mask here, and I build this out, smooth, build, smooth. I'm always smoothing while I'm working, by the way. Build this up and smooth it back, then take the standard brush and make a little Y shape here. This bit of form here is called the anti-helix. So there's the helix and then the anti-helix. So I wasn't kidding when I said that everything is either named a thing or anti that thing when it comes to the ears. So let's give a nice sense of structure here. I'm going to go to the pinch brush, and I just want to create a little edge here. Ears I find really interesting because they have a certain structural quality that almost feels machined. There's planes that are very apparent in the ear, and I really like sculpting them that way. I'll go to the Trim Dynamic brush, which is B for brush, T for trim, and then Trim Dynamic is D. And I'll use that just to sort of sketch in these planes here. I want to accentuate this plane, and this plane, this plane. Just very gently building that up, and execute diamond mesh to fix that stretched face there. Make sure that from the back, you don't want the ear to grow straight out of the head. We want to get the back of the conch in here. So we'll pull these faces back. And I'm going to mask the ear. Invert that mask. And I might tilt them back. And look at the character from about the side here. I'll take my transpose rotate, and maybe we'll tilt them back a bit. Well, I like that. I like that. Let's clear our mask. Take our move brush. Let's give some thought to this muzzle, this brow. Let's bring this down. Cool. I'm going to take my damn standard brush and sort of do a little bit more of what I was doing earlier, where I was saying I was sort of sketching in the flow of wrinkles and form. So I'm going to do a little bit more of that here. So what's everybody's favorite monster? I'll tell you my favorite monster. My favorite monster is from a 1980 called Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead was designed and sculpted at Stan Winston Studios by a lot of the folks who are now ADI Studios, Amalgamated Dynamics Incorporated. And it is just one of my absolute favorite monsters. It scared the crap out of me when I was little. But it's super cool. It's all long and spindly, big, scary head. Fun movie to watch. Sorry about the sirens. I live on a busy street. So what's your favorite monster? I'll pop over in the chat box in a minute and see what the answers are. Pumpkinhead was always really my favorite. And after that, it was zombies. Just zombies. I love zombies. I love sculpting zombies. One of my favorite artists is Bernie Reichsten, who I highly recommend checking his stuff out. He unfortunately passed away last year, but he is one of the most amazing monster illustrators. Did a lot of concept art too. He was working in concept art for a long time. But Bernie's zombies were just the best. And he did an absolutely beautiful illustrated Frankenstein. I think it's the centennial of Frankenstein this year, by the way, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Or bicentennial. No, it wouldn't be the centennial. Let's start thinking about these eyes. Let's come in here and just going to get a sense of the wrinkles under here. Nice shadow here. I'm going to take the move brush, and this is a neat thing the move brush does. I'm going to touch down with the move brush, press and hold the shift key, and then drag. And what that does is it drags the faces along the surface of your model. So instead of pushing and pulling in and out, it slides things. It's a slide tool. It's kind of a well-hidden little trick inside of ZBrush. And let's inflate those nostrils a little bit, flare those out. Look at that nose from the top. I'm going to give it a bit more of a aggressive shape. Shapes can be aggressive and shapes can be friendly. Shapes can be soft and shapes can be angular and scary. So there's an amazing artist that introduced me to that idea. His name is Jim McPherson. He's a sculptor. He's been a sculptor for decades. He used to work for in the film industry as a makeup effects artist. And he's a digital sculptor now. And just really a fantastic artist. And he taught me, when I was working with him at General Giant Studios, to think about whether or not a shape is a scary shape or if a shape is a friendly shape. That had not really occurred to me before, and it was a really valuable lesson because some shapes are soft and broad and not very scary, and other shapes can have the suggestion of a lot of aggression and a lot of scariness to them. So that was a really nice kind of lesson there. I'm going to look at the silhouette here in Silhouette. I like this sort of almost boxer nose that we're getting here, this sort of blunted nose, like it's been broken or something. It's kind of a neat effect that's happening. And I'm going to mask the upper portion of the face here. Unmask the bottom. And take the move brush. And I'm going to pull this jaw out a bit. See what we get from that. I need to have a drink of water, excuse me. Let's take a look at what everybody's favorite monsters were. Oh, that's how I scroll. I was trying to figure out how to scroll. Flying monkeys from Wizard of Oz. Oh, they're amazing. Yes. Hey, Shane. Oh, thank you. Oh, hey, everybody. Sorry, I'm having trouble scrolling, and I'm trying to see what people have said. So, could you show one of your approach to sculpting female form? That'd be great. So I'm trying to get right. Yeah, I can do a stream on that. Cabin in the Woods. Yeah, those are fun. Is that Pixelogic Paul? Hello. Hey, Paul. War of the Monsters game. Cool. Oh, golems. Golems are creepy. Very cool. Dragons. Xenomorphs. Yeah, the xenomorphs are amazing, and dragons are great. Monsters in the Oval Office. Gremlins. Yes. Gremlins rule. And Jim McPherson, that sculptor I was telling you about, he sculpted some of the Gremlins in Gremlins 2. The Leprechaun, oh, he was great. Yeah. Pumpkinhead. Critters. How did I forget Critters? Oh my god. Critters are awesome. The Thing. Question about asymmetry. I usually start asymmetry about this point. Just scrolling back up here. I usually start asymmetry about this stage, really, because you know, I try and bring asymmetry in real early on, if possible, and be thinking about it from the very, very start. But I'm also talking and thinking about other things, so I haven't disabled or broken symmetry just yet. But as soon as possible, and I'll probably start thinking about it here pretty soon. What I want to do now is sort of put some kind of subtools in here for teeth. I want the teeth to be coming out of the jaw itself, so this is a good opportunity for us to do some asymmetry here. So I'm going to turn off my symmetry, and let's make some sockets for some teeth here. We'll put a socket here, and we'll put a socket here. It's not quite. Let's put a socket here. There we go. And I will append a polysphere. And then I'll bring that polysphere off to the side here. And for this sort of stuff, I definitely want to use the gizmo. God, I love the gizmo. Let me tell you. It's just... I've been a ZBrush user since 2004 or 2003. And I used to go to bed at night thinking, I wish that there was a gizmo that was like 3D Studio Max and Maya. And then come 2018, we got one! And it was the best day ever! I really like transpose, you know, I mean, I don't mind using transpose, but there's some things that are just so much easier for me to do using the gizmo. The two work really well together. As a matter of fact, I had somebody I did a class in Montreal a couple weeks ago, and somebody was asking if they still needed to learn transpose, because it's tricky to learn. Transpose, because it's such a unique thing, and it needs to be a unique thing because you use it to do transpose posing. So it doesn't behave the way people might expect a move tool to behave. And I was like, yeah, you really definitely still need to learn it and understand it, because there's things that you can do with transpose that you just can't do with the gizmo, because they're two different tools that have some overlap. So I'm going to bring this little tusk up here. That's cute. I like that. And I'm going to go back to the knob here and just do a little bit of breakup here in this lower lip area. I will often sort of sketch wrinkles and then smooth them back a bit. Really great thing, like reference. I love books, by the way. I love books. I love videos. I love DVDs. I love learning. I love classes. I take classes all the time. I'm constantly a student. I've been a student for the past, almost 15 years. I love taking classes. And I recommend some things that are really good for you all that want to learn more about sort of sculpting and form. There's a couple. One of them is Follw. He's an incredible sculptor, and he has got an amazing set of books. And he sculpts in clay, but those lessons are directly applicable to what you do in ZBrush. And he's just really, really great. He was actually going to be doing ZBrush. He talked to me about doing something for his last book, but I wasn't able to because I had other commitments. But I know that he's aware of ZBrush and quite possibly is using it a bit. And the other one is John Brown, who for a long time was an instructor at Gnomon. I'm not sure if John's still at Gnomon, but he's got a website. He's got instructional videos, and he, again, is a clay sculptor. And you will learn so much about sculpting from him. He is just incredible. So I recommend checking out his maquette sculpting DVDs and bust sculpting DVDs, because they are just really, really useful. I'm going to go back to this tooth, and I'm going to delete my lower subdivision level so I can just Control Alt, click and drag, and duplicate this and make my life easier. And I'm going to unlock the gizmo, undo that. I'm going to unlock the gizmo, reset it. There we go. So I can rotate that around. and change that position and scale. Cute, like that. And I'm going to switch over to the head now, taking the inflate brush, and I'm just going to inflate along the base. So it has a sense of a root there. It feels like it's rooted into that surface. Maybe suggest some of that tooth down underneath the surface there. Just checking the chat here. There's any questions from the gift there? Yep. Unit measurement would be really nice. I'm using an Intuos 4. Thanks, Tuatara. Cool. Awesome. I just wanted to see the chat and see if there's any questions. Cameron, hey! Nice to see you. Skeksis. Skeksis are awesome. Skeksis are real creepy. Cool. Yeah, I saw Dark Crystal. It's going to be a good little outward down. Very old. I saw the Dark Crystal in the theater. I did. I saw it in the theater when I was little. And man, the Skeksis scared me. I thought they were really cool though. It really freaked me out when they drained the life out of that one poor little creature. So I'm going to do a few more little teeth here. I'm going to do another socket here. I'm going to do 3 little sockets here for the teeth along the bottom. Grab this one, and I will transpose move that, scale it down, position this. Yeah, everybody should go find Jim McPherson's website and send him an email and tell him that I sent you. His work is great, though. I've learned so much from traditional sculptors in my life, and I've been really fortunate to work with some amazing clay sculptors, both who are working digitally now or still working in clay. It was funny, when I started my career, when I started the second half of my career, because I was a makeup effects artist before I was a digital artist, I decided that I wanted to sort of like convert or get as many traditional sculptors onto ZBrush as possible back in 2006, 2007. And it's funny, I went and I did that. I converted a whole bunch of folks, and as time moved on, and ZBrush is just naturally the best way to sculpt for manufacturing, it really took over. And then a lot of places where I had sort of advocated for ZBrush, they didn't do clay at all anymore. There was no more wax, no more clay. Everything was done in ZBrush. And it was a bit awesome, but it was also like, ooh, but clay. But, if I had the choice, I mean, if somebody said to me, you can do this project in clay or you can do this project in ZBrush, I'm well into the point these days where I'll just say absolutely ZBrush, because you've got the ability to undo, you've got the ability to 3D print, you've got so many brushes, so many, and I'm so accustomed to it at this point, it's so second nature, that I can't imagine really trying to tackle a project another way. I don't like these teeth. I'm going to make these smaller. Something about them I don't quite like. I'm going to bring them closer together. I want to be able to, undo that. Draw my character again. I want to be able to select these teeth independently of each other, so I need to make sure that they've all got a separate polygroup. So I'm going to save my work. And that's another thing too. Like, I can make a big decision like this and say, no, these teeth suck, I want to change them. I'm going to go to polygroups, and I'm going to auto group, so each tooth gets a separate polygroup. And that'll make it easier to work. I can Control-Shift-Click on one, mask it, invert the mask, and then I can change the shape of this tooth here. I can make these sorts of decisions and say, okay, well, I'm going to make a big change to these teeth here. I think I'm going to crowd some little teeth here. So I'm going to make another copy of this and bring it down here, almost like a shark or something that's got a whole bunch of dentals crowded together. Yeah. So my first sculptures I did in my parents' basement when I was little. I was sculpting Halloween masks because I loved Halloween masks. I mean, I still do, but I was just crazy about Halloween masks when I was little. And I would be really excited when Halloween would come around and you see the masks in the shop. And I thought the greatest thing in the world, the best thing ever, would be to be able to make your own Halloween masks. And so that's what I started sculpting. I was reading this magazine called Fangoria, and you could get, it was a horror movie magazine, and you could get videos from there on how to sculpt masks, and I was learning from tutorials and working out of books from the school library, which were really primitive, but they got me started. So I would do these little sculptures in my parents' basement. And it was funny because, my dad didn't think that you could make a living doing this stuff, and he was always a bit bemused by it. But a couple years after I moved to Los Angeles, I was visiting with him, and he was like, I'm real sorry that I didn't see the value of those monster masks. So I finally convinced him that there was a market for making monster masks in some capacity. So I want to build up this sort of form where these teeth are coming down into the jaw there. It's kind of neat. Take this one, I'll stretch this one up a bit. Hey, this is a neat trick. Watch this. If I take my move brush, go to Brush, Curve, and turn on Accurate Curve mode, this is really great. We use this to death on Pacific Rim 2. It's great for making little spines and little sharp points. That's nice, and I like that asymmetry there. I'm going to isolate this guy, this tooth here, and I want to give that just a little bit of rotation out this way. There we go. Cool. Go to mask and save my work. Let's go back to the face here. Let's turn our X symmetry back on. Since I'm working over on the side of the face here where you can never see both sides of the face at the same time, I think it's okay to work symmetrically here. I'm going to take my Clay Tubes brush and I'm going to fill out this area back behind the jaw. Take my move brush, pull this out. Oops, I still have Accurate Curve mode turned on. If you leave that turned on, it makes your move brush real pointed. So you want to turn that off if you're not using it. I'm just going to be sketching here. I'm getting towards the center line of the head again, so I'll turn off my asymmetry, turn down my Z intensity on the Dan Standard brush, and I'm just sort of sketching the flow, the flesh here. And a little crease down here. Standard brush. Take the inflate brush and let's pucker that a bit. Pucker that a bit. I'm just making sort of loose gestural sketch lines with my brush because I'll smooth these away, smooth 90% of these away and resculpt them again later. I'm just trying to make a roadmap for the direction of the wrinkles and the flow in the skin here. Let's clear that mask. And let's play around with the back of the head here. Let's bring this out with the move brush. There we go, I like that angle there. I like the angle here and here. And here. Shoop, 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 shoop. I'm getting a little bit more occipital there. Here we go. And I'm going to take my damn standard brush and start thinking about the eye socket here. And I want to get a nice sense of this, the bony structure of the cheekbones butting up against the fleshiness of like the nasolabial fold here. Like this whole area right here should be bony and hard. So I want to get a sense of this bony structure of this cheekbone here. And the contrast of the fleshy part, the fatty deposits and the fleshy bits that are butted up against it here. So I just want to be thinking about that. Turn off my asymmetry. And I'm going to mask out this little bag of skin under the eye here. Invert that mask, and I'll take the inflate brush and run it along the lower portion just to give a little bit of volume and gravity there. And I'll isolate this little bit here, do the same. I just want to get a sense of there being bags of skin there. And what's happening there is it's fluid and fatty tissues that are disconnected from the skin and sagging. So that's what gives you those. So you get folds and flaps like that because gravity is acting on the skin. So you don't want to just carve them in. You want to have a sense that they're sagging down. You can use the brush depth gravity control right here. And you can definitely do that. I just tend to do it manually just so I can make it, I can vary the strength of it throughout the course of like a single eye bag, you know? I've got symmetry turned on at this point, but I am going to go in and break that symmetry around the eyes here. I just want to get a lot of headway made with them first, and then we'll go break symmetry. holding down the Alt key to kind of crease that upper eyelid. And I want to give a sense of gaze. I'm going to go to the eyes here. I'm going to go to the standard brush, drag rectangle stroke, and I'm going to select alpha 06. I'm going to turn up my Z intensity and turn on X symmetry, and I just want to give a corneal bulge here, just like that. Just so I get a sense of gaze, like where that character is looking. Just when I'm working, I just kind of like to have that sense of where the eye is. It helps me picture the character. So I'm going to come from the top view here. Oops, saving project file, there we go. And I just want to work this lower eyelid, looking down on it from the top. I'm going to mask out the eyes here. Bring these cheekbones out. I'm going to mask the eyes again because I don't want to affect those shapes in there. I'm going to bring these bits up. Ooh, I like that happy accent there. I'm getting a nice little swoop down. I like that, so I want to accentuate that. I'm going to accentuate that, turn off my X symmetry. And I want to accentuate that sort of furrowing, creasing of this brow shape here, where it's coming and riding over the zygomatic process here. My standard brush, pull out just the corner of those eye sockets. Doing standard. Turn off X symmetry. You want to be really careful about using X symmetry when you're furrowing the brow. It's best just not to have it on at all because it's going to look weird if you do. I like that. That's kind of cool. Bring this way. I'm just going to sketch. Oops. A little bit of a delay on my brush because of the broadcast. There we go. Again, I'm using just a Cintiq Intuos 4, or excuse me, a Wacom Intuos 4. I used to have a Cintiq, and I stopped using it when I left Los Angeles and moved to New Zealand. Like I said, like 10 years ago. I didn't have a Cintiq at my next job, and I liked the Intuos 4. I think it's really cool to work on screen. It's just not something that I haven't had it since then, and I haven't missed it. But I'm sure if I had it again, I would be like, oh, it's awesome. Oops, undo that. Smooth that. Save my work. 7. And let's check the chat. Let's take a little break here and check the chat. Are you getting background static on the mic? I've got a little fan on. Let me turn that down. Awesome, Shane. I'm glad. Accurate curve. Yeah, if you forget it's turned on, it can be a real pain. Snake Hook is great. Snake Hook 2 is really good too. Cool. Let me know if turning off that fan fixed that background noise. PVC monster from parents' basement. Yeah, adhesive fumes are not good. That's awesome. You're sculpting a guy that turns into a lion. That's awesome. Fangoria and Famous Monsters. You know what? I have, you can't see it from here, but over in that corner of the room, I've got a box with every Fangoria from the first issue all the way up to like the late 90s. I love Fangoria and Famous Monsters. Oh, it's great. Fory forever. Make the monster look like Elvis. Did you start this all today? Yeah, I just started it however long ago when I started. Oh, Nick, JPM was not the beginning. Hey, Nick. So Nick is in the stream. I've known Nick. How many years have I known you, Nick? Nick is a professional sculptor and designer and all-around awesome artist, and I met Nick when he was a little kid. He came out to my studio and was like, helped me put together a big monster puppet many a year ago. Side effects. Thank you. Cool. Let's go back to the Mr. Creepy here. So, where are we? Where shall we go here? I'm just going to do a little bit more sketching. I'm going to take my damn standard and just do a little bit of sketching through here. Again, it's kind of hard to describe. I'm basically just imagining that there's flesh wrapped around these anatomical shapes that I've just now sculpted, and then I'm just running my brush in along where I feel like that flesh would wrinkle and fold. It's kind of like, I consider it drawing a little roadmap. And again, I'm not married to these shapes. I'm not saying this wrinkle here is going to stay. This is the wrinkle for this part of the body. It's not. I'm going to smooth it away. It's really important, I think, to always think about every stroke you're putting down as being temporary. It's very zen. Every stroke is temporary. But really, every stroke is temporary. Don't get locked into being like, oh my god, I put this stroke down and I gotta fix it and protect it. That's true. If you create shapes and then you get caught up trying to protect them, that's bad. That's why I don't use layers. A lot of times people ask me about layers in my classes. I teach layers, absolutely, you know, and in ZBrush though, I don't use them. I'll paint creature skins in Mari, and I'll use layers there. But when I'm sculpting in ZBrush, I don't use layers because I never had layers in traditional media, and I learned there that if I work through my mistakes, if I sculpt through my mistakes, I can actually get some really nice effects. But if you sit there and keep tinkering with layers and undoing and tinkering with layers, I feel like you can get option paralysis where you stop moving forward. There's a joke once, you know, the digital painter that makes a stroke and then does undo twice, so they're effectively painting backwards. So I think it's the same thing. I don't worry about using layers. Now I will use them sometimes. Like there are things that I would use them for. Like if we were doing you know, a wedge or a proof of concept where I was trying to illustrate, well, this is how this particular part of the anatomy would function. This is how this jaw would open. I would use layers for, you know, very functional things like that. But in terms of like storing different options while I'm sculpting, I don't do that. I will just sculpt it, and if it doesn't work, I'll change it. Because I think it's more detrimental to you as a sculptor to get caught up in worrying about preserving shapes and worrying about making things, not losing something, rather than just, you know, sculpting it. Let's put some ribs in here. So I'm going to do this standard brush, and I've still got that set to drag rectangle stroke. Let's go to the freehand stroke, alpha 1, and I'm just going to suggest some ribs here. Like, I'm just suggesting them. It's probably not really the right rib flow here. The xiphoid process there, which is the little pokey out bit at the base of the rib cage, the arch of the rib cage there. Then the sternum up here. Take the move brush. Let's look at this rib cage from underneath. Let's bring this out. Standard brush. And I'm being really aggressive with these ribs because I'm going to sculpt over them. Alright, so I'm just going to do another angle change coming back this way. Has Nick told y'all the story about hanging out and making a monster puppet in my house yet in the chat box? My very, very first job was a really good friend who huge influence on me. When I grew up doing like monster makeup and masks in my basement, like I said, and I used to go to this makeup supply shop in Atlanta, Georgia called Atlanta Costume. And they thought it was really cute. There was this little kid coming in and buying monster makeup and latex and mask making supplies and bringing in like fangs that I had made. My mom would take me to the dental supply warehouse and I would get materials to make fangs. So they thought it was really cute. And so they gave me the business card of a local makeup effects artist when I was like 15 years old. And his name was Bill Johnson, Bill Splat Johnson. And so I took that card and I put it in my makeup kit, and it was there for 5 years. It wasn't until my 20th birthday I got up the guts. It took me 5 years to get the guts to call him. So I called him and said, hey, can I come work for you for free? Can I come sweep out your studio? And he said, I'm really busy right now. Call me back tomorrow. So I was like, crap, okay. And like I said, I was a little bit shy. So it was like hard enough to call him in the first place, and I have to call him the next day. So the next day rolls around and I call him. And he says, you know, I don't ever do this, but I'm really busy right now. Go ahead and come on out tomorrow and help me out. And so I ended up sweeping out the studio, learning all sorts of stuff that day, and then set the next day that I would come out, you know, the next weekend. And so that went on for years. I became really good friends with him. I ended up sculpting in his studio. I was a sculptor on Eight-Legged Freaks, this giant spider movie. I worked on the movie In Dreams. He got me started. And it was all because I called him and said, can I come out and do this? I asked for it. Don't be afraid to ask for things. A really good bit of advice, I think, would don't be afraid to ask. A lot of times we don't feel empowered to basically reach out and say, hey, I want to do this thing. Can I do this thing? Just ask. And you'd be surprised at how far ahead you get just because nobody thinks to just ask. Everyone assumes the answer is no. And a lot of times, you know, it's like I always say, it's like 80% of the struggle is making something. Most people sit and dream about something that they want to make and they never make it. Or they dream about doing something they want to do and they don't do it. So if you just take the effort to do it, you're already a huge leap ahead of most other people. And even if it's not made good, you've still made something. You've still done something. And a lot of people don't do that. And that's a huge hurdle to get over. So ask for things. Just do things. You know, you want to do cadaver lab? Call the local medical school. Ask to speak to the lab technician for the anatomy lab and say, hey, can I come out and observe your anatomy lab? If you don't ask, then people don't have a chance to say yes or no. So I've sculpted in these ribs really, really broadly here, specifically because I want to take my brush and I want to just run them along here. And by virtue of the way this brush works, you see it sort of adds into the recessed areas first. So what I'm doing is I'm filling in the spaces between those ribs. I'm kind of making it feel like there's skin stretched across these bones, just like this. This works really nice on sort of cadaverous kind of creatures. I'm going to go to the standard brush, and I'm going to catch some highlight. Oops, that's too strong. I'm going to turn down my Z intensity and sort of catch some highlight. I'm going to stretch some muscle and tissue across there. Take my standard, or take my smooth brush and knock that back a little bit. Yeah, I think it's really important just to ask for things. I'm going to take the clay tubes brush, and I'm going to take Alpha 58. I love this alpha. And with the clay tubes brush, I'm just going to run it through here and watch what happens. It builds up these wrinkly kind of texture going in between those ribs. Great stuff. It looks really, really nice. I like this. Hey Paul, Paul Pixelogic, if you're still in the stream, can I mention that thing that's can I mention that thing that we're maybe doing? You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm allowed to mention that yet. So that was pretty vague. Paul and I are planning on doing an all ZBrush remake of Dawn of the Dead. Let's pop over the chat box and see. Pet thing. Flip normal guys hate the smooth. Be a professional, I can figure it out and make it. Nice, Nick. Can we all come out and sweep your studio? Bill Spot Johnson. Yeah. Xiphoid Process sounds like some sort of technical band. It's like, yeah, Xiphoid Process. It'd be like a German techno band. We are Xiphoid Process, and we're here to make sounds. Microphone is getting scraped on your clothing. I don't think my microphone would be on my computer. I don't know if I'm scraping it. I'll see. I'm not sure what that would be. Yeah, that alpha is great. It's my favorite alpha. Stream only talking like Arnie. Now we are going to sculpt the skin across the ribs. So I love this alpha. This alpha is great. And it's cool because it makes a raised kind of wrinkle if you don't hold down the Alt key, which is really hard to sculpt in clay. So one of the most beautiful sculptures I've ever seen is by Miles Tevis, who's another amazing artist you should look up. Look up Miles Tevis. He's on Facebook. You can go nag him, say Maddie sent you. He sculpted Lestat for Vampire Lestat in the desiccated version, who had the really, I call it nana skin. Like if you look at the back of your grandmother's hands, she'll have those raised tissuey wrinkles, and they're so beautiful and such a unique texture and really hard to sculpt. And this alpha makes that type of texture really, really easy, because people always think about wrinkles going in and not coming out. So I want to pick out some more highlight here. So here's another thing. I'll tell you another really good book. Another great book to get is Modeling and Sculpting the Human Figure by Edward Lanteri. Edward Lanteri. It is a turn-of-the-century sculpting manual. It's more text than pictures. There's very few pictures in it, but the text is golden. I've had that book since I was 20, and it's a different book every time I read it. It is my favorite book on sculpture, and it's absolutely amazing. He teaches sculpting in a very French academic way, which is very much like the way painting is taught in the French Academy, or was in the French Academy, because I did the Florence Academy of Art, which is an atelier-style school, where you are working from a model and you're recreating the anatomy you see before you in your sculpture. You're doing it pure observation. And so the way they teach, and the way Lanteri teaches, is he talks about the color of the shadow. Now what I mean by that is if you look at this shadow here, it's darker, it has a darker value than this shadow here. That's what he means by the color of the shadow. So all through this book, he talks about manipulating the color of the shadow. So it was a couple years of reading this book, a light bulb went off for me, and I realized he's talking about the fact that when you're painting, you're putting down highlight and shadow to make a shape. You're creating the illusion of a shape by manipulating highlight and shadow. When you're sculpting, you are manipulating highlight and shadow by changing the shape. So highlight and shadow is what gives you your image. If we take away highlight and shadow, we have this that you see on screen right now. There's nothing. When you bring in highlight and shadow, then you have form. So Lanteri talks about gauging the color of your shadow, the relative lightness or darkness. And it's full of these wonderful gems. Like, this might seem like kind of the obvious, but to me it was an epiphany, where if you take something like this rib, and I want to darken this rib, this shadow here, your natural instinct is typically going to be to go in here, take the Alt key, and just darken that shadow. But that's not actually always the case. He makes the point that if you want to darken a shadow, sometimes what you need to do is raise the area next to that area that you want to darken. So you're casting more of a shadow there. You don't always want to dig in, because if you keep digging in, you make a very crenated, very deep, creviced-looking figure, which is not realistic, because if you look at the creases in your skin, they don't go that deep. Oftentimes, there's a raised hill next to the crease that casts a deeper shadow. So right here, I'll take my standard brush and I'll build up this side here, and that will cast more of a shadow there, and it gives me a darker shadow, it gives me a darker value. Just, this is kind of a random sort of demonstration of that, but that sort of theory, that very theoretical, very technique-based approach to sculpture is all through the Lenteri book. It's very inexpensive. It's a Dover classic, which means you can get it for like 8 quid. It's nothing compared to other art books, and it's worth it. Go grab it on Amazon. It's such a good book. And like I said, it's a book that has lasted me many, many, many years. It's my favorite art instruction book. And I love 19th century instruction manuals. I think they're fantastic, and I think a whole lot, well, I know for a fact that a whole lot of art instruction was lost because we don't work word of mouth anymore. So a lot of the artists, because in the 19th century, if this were like, you know, 1888, and we were learning from other artists, you wouldn't go to school to learn how to sculpt. You would go work for another artist who would show you how to do it by doing it. And so like after the 19th century, when modernity kind of took over in modern art, and I'm not somebody who's anti-modern art at all. I have an art history minor, and I can appreciate modernity. But when it took over and people started buying, you know, Rodin, people started buying the Impressionists, people started, you know, buying Manet, they were moving away from like the Bouguereau and the classical realists. Those artists didn't have other artists in their studio anymore, so their tradition died. For example, there's an amazing artist named Pierre-Paul Prud'hon, who's one of my favorite draftsmen. He used to make his own chalk. He does these beautiful drawings on blue paper of nudes, and they're absolutely stunning. And we don't actually know how he made his chalk, because he didn't write it down. His students, he taught his students verbally, and his students, he ran out of students. So that's how traditions die. And it's really interesting that I was very fortunate that I had a professor from Taiwan who had learned in China, and the Chinese classical realist sculpting and painting tradition is informed by the Russian school, and the Russian school was the only school that survived after sort of the death of the Western European classical realist art movement, when everything started becoming very abstract. It survived in Russia and then survived in China. So I was really, really lucky to learn a lot from him. So that's a bit of a, I'm babbling, sorry, it's a bit of a segue. My point is that a lot of those 19th century manuals are really great, and they translate into ZBrush. Anything you can learn about painting translates into ZBrush. Anything you can learn about sculpting and form will translate into ZBrush. It's not a stretch, it's not hard to do. And I just think it's just so good to go and break away from sort of the same sort of instruction and the same sort of techniques that everyone's looking at, and go back in time and look at something new, which is also, you know, very, very old. I think that's kind of a nice technique. Sorry, I get excited and I start babbling. I should get back to sculpting here. So I'm going to take my clay tubes brush again, alpha 1, and I'm just going to, whoop, that's too strong, let's undo that. I'm going to turn down my Z intensity, I'm going to turn down my draw size, and let's turn that Z intensity up again. I just want to bring some bits of skin across here. There we go. Back to clay 2, or go back to Dan Standard. Let's increase this through here. Let's break our symmetry. Let's go into the eye here. Smooth this back a bit. When I'm sculpting something, I'm imagining that my finger is running across it. I try and imagine what it feels like while I'm making a line. I try and look at that shape and imagine what it feels like to my finger. And then I sculpt like that. I sculpt thinking about what the form feels like as well as what it looks like. And I guess that comes from just what I'm accustomed to, but I think it's really a valuable experiment to look at your stuff and sort of think about what it might feel like. I'm going to mask this eye bag here, going to invert the mask, I'm going to feather it, I'm going to take the move brush and tug that little eye bag over. Do I have my asymmetry? Oh, I have asymmetry turned on. I didn't realize it. I thought I turned it off. Check the chat box here. Visualize with tactile sense. Yeah, that's it, right. Miles Tevis. So his name is Miles Tevis. Amazing illustrator. Oops, what just happened there? It wants me to log in. Oh, okay. Well, you can see how I just spelled that on my screen, I assume. Yeah, his name is Miles Tevis. Sculptors Pro Mode. Yeah, Sculptors Pro Mode is nice, but I don't use it as much as Dynamesh just because I'm super accustomed to using Sculptors Pro Mode, using Dynamesh. I use Sculptors Pro Mode if I've decimated something and I need to do some tweaking of an area or some sculpting into an area. I'll use Sculptors Pro Mode for that. But typically I don't sculpt a whole thing in it. Yes, Oscar, thank you for posting the title. Oh, thank you, Katsuni. First contact digital sculpting with my book and Eric should do an entomology lesson. That would be amazing. Cool. I don't think I think Paul is out of the stream, so I can't get my answer from him. So I can't tell you my secret. So I'll tell you next time. So let's go back to that guy here. And okay, I'm going to save my work. And I'm going to show you how I bounce from Dynamesh into a subdivision model. So I want to be able to step down my subdivision levels and do a bit of smoothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to duplicate. I'm going to duplicate the character and turn on solo. So I'm just looking at this mesh. And I'm going to go to geometry and I'm going to go to ZRemesher and I'm going to ZRemesh it to about, let's do 4,000 faces and then ZRemesh it. Might be a little slow. What I'll do is I'll reproject my remeshed model onto my Dynamesh model. That allows me to capture all the detail, but it allows me to also have a model with subdivision levels. So I think that's really important when you're sculpting. Well, while we're waiting for that to process, I'll show you something. Watch this. So see this? This is a normal silk handkerchief, okay? So watch this. Watch really, really carefully. I'm take a silk handkerchief and I'm going to stuff it into my hand, just like so. Watch. Now you're watching? Watch very carefully. It's gone. But wait, watch this. It comes back. Hey, it's finished now. So let's go ahead and do our projection. So I'm going to subdivide once. I'm going to turn off solo, and I'm just going to turn off the eyeballs and the teeth. So all I have visible are my remeshed model and my high-res Dynamesh model. So I'm going to take that remesh model that I've subdivided once, I'm going to go to project, and I'm going to click project all, and it's going to project that remeshed model onto the Dynamesh. I'll divide again, project all. And I'll divide one more time and project all. Y'all are like, where did that handkerchief go? Okay, so now I'll turn on Solo again. So here I've got my remeshed version. Here I've got the Dynamesh. Wait, no, that's mine. Wait a second here, what's just happened? Geometry? I accidentally subdivided my Dynamesh. I've got 3 of them now. What the hell? I accidentally doubled up. I'm going to delete that one. Sorry, that's my Dynamesh. Yeah, that's my Dynamesh. Somehow I hit duplicate twice, so there we go. And there's my turn off Dynamesh. There we go. Okay, cool. So I've got my remeshed version here, which has 2 subdivision levels, and then I've got my Dynamesh here, which has all that detail sculpted in it. So I'll go back to this guy here, I'll divide him, and I will click project all, and it'll shrink wrap him onto the Dynamesh. There we go. And so if I switch between them, you can see they're very hard to tell the difference. I'm going to divide this one more time, and I'll project it again. There we go. So now, as I switch between the two, you can't tell the difference. This one, the Dynamesh, has no subdivision levels. This one has subdivision levels, so I can now step down and step back up. So this means I can step down in my subdivision levels and I can make big shape changes to this character using just the move brush, and that's actually really important. I believe I was talking to Paul when Dynamesh was first introduced, and we were talking about how it's an amazing tool and we love it. I love it, but it actually makes ZBrush a little bit harder to teach because people don't understand why you want subdivision levels. And the reason is I can step down into my lower subdivision levels now and I can make these big shape changes that would be harder to do if I wasn't using Dynamesh. It would be harder to do if I was using Dynamesh because Dynamesh has millions of polygons. I can now step back up my subdivision level and get all my detail back. I can also step down a couple subdivision levels, and this is a great trick. I'll take my smooth brush and turn down the Z intensity. And I'm going to smooth these areas very, very slightly. Just going to gently smooth these areas out. All right? Then I'm going to step back up my subdivision levels, and ZBrush tries to reintroduce that detail, but it mutes it. You see how that sort of like pushes everything back down into the surface a little bit? So if we undo that and just give this a light smoothing and then step back up, it kind of makes that all a little bit more subtle. Just checking the chats here. Start creating characters, stuff like this. Start with Maya. I would start with ZBrush. Start with ZBrush and then learn Maya after ZBrush. There is a ZBrush version that is, it's not a student version, but it's ZBrush Core, and it's a really good one to start with. Traditional sculpting, Sculptress. I'm not using Scale Master right now, Nick, but I would if I had to worry about scale. I don't have to worry about scale in this demo, so I'm not really thinking about it. Cool. Awesome. So, let's see, where are we? I'm going to go ahead and step down a couple subdivision levels again. I'm going to smooth back these ribs, step back up, and then I'll make all that a little bit more muted. Step these back down, smooth this back, step back up. There we go. And now I can go to my Dynamesh, and I can delete it. And then turn back on the eyes and the teeth, and turn off Solo. Cool. So, I am going to go back to my damn standard brush. And asymmetry is turned off now. And I'm just going to do a little bit of wrinkling and folding here. So I'm going to bring some brow wrinkles through here. Go to the standard brush with alpha 1, and I'm just going to build up some of these wrinkles, just gently, just lightly brushing over them, just slightly. Go to my light, move my light over to about 11 o'clock, just so I can rake it across there and get a good view of what I'm doing. I was so preoccupied with talking, I didn't move my light around, which is something that I do and I recommend doing while you're working, is to move the light so you can get a clear picture of what things are going to look like under different lighting conditions. I'm going to go back to asymmetry because I'm working on the cheekbones here and I don't want to make those too asymmetrical. I'm working on the skeletal portion of it, so and I'm going to go to the lighting menu here, and I'm going to turn on a secondary light. I'm going to move it up to about 3 o'clock, turn the volume up really high, and then I'm going to click that light once to put it behind the model, so we've got a little rim light there. There we go. That's nice. That tells a lot, that rim light there. So I'm going to add a subdivision level. Damn standard brush. Just do a little bit more cross-hatching of these wrinkles around the eyes. Turn off asymmetry. Yeah, somebody in the chat box was asking about learning Maya first. If you're interested in doing characters, I would learn ZBrush first. But don't neglect to learn Maya, because if you're trying to go into sort of a modeling pipeline or going for a job as a modeler, sometimes they'll ask, do you know Maya? Because there is a problem where people will know ZBrush, but they won't know Maya. They won't know how to polymodel outside of ZBrush, and it is important in a pipeline situation to have that understanding. So make sure that you learn Maya. But don't fall into the trap of thinking you have to learn all of Maya. Maya is a huge program, and nobody knows all of it except for the highest level Maya generalists. And even they really don't know all of it. Maya is too huge of a program for one person to know all of it, unless your job is just teaching and learning Maya, maybe. You pick what you're going to learn, like polymodeling and UV mapping. You learn that part of Maya. Your basic Maya navigation, maybe a little bit of animation or dynamics, because sometimes that can be useful when you're modeling. But don't, I see a lot of students look at Maya and freak out and think they have to learn all of it, and you really don't. It's not something you have to do. I'm going to take the move brush and I'm just going to slide this eye bag over here. So a great anatomy book. My favorite anatomy book is Elliot Goldfinger's Atlas of Anatomy for the Artist. It is fabulous. It is fantabulous. It is the bee's knees. And when I say something's the bee's knees, I mean it. I don't use the bee's knees lightly. It's really good. He uses a lot of axial MRI imagery, so you see the anatomy from the front, the side, as well as the top and cutaway, which is really, really descriptive. Because if you can't cut into a body and see how thick a muscle is or see how they interrelate to each other, the only way to tell is by looking at an axial MRI image. So it's really good to know, good to look at that. If you do want to do cadaver lab, I do recommend just reaching out to your local medical school and expressing an interest. A lot of medical schools will have a class you can audit as a non-student. UCLA for a long time had an anatomy class that used elements from the medical school, which you could take as an independent student. You didn't have to be registered at UCLA. So you might look into that if you're in Los Angeles. If you're not, just look into your local medical school, because we have a whole lot of taboo and weirdness tied up in cadaver lab. We think it's this forbidden, weird thing, but doctors and medical students don't feel that way. They're actually quite often charmed by the idea of an artist having an interest in studying anatomy, because artists were studying anatomy at the very beginning, just right next to doctors. It's there's a certain romantic quality to that. And anytime I've talked to an anatomy lab supervisor, she's always been really keen on the idea of involving an artist. I was very fortunate because I was given full access to an anatomy lab over a Christmas break. I went to the University of Utah Medical School and did 50 hours of cadaver lab, which is about what you do in gross anatomy for pre-med. But it was all myoskeletal, so it was all muscular and skeletal. I didn't do anything with the nervous system. I didn't have to do anything with the body cavity and the digestive system. I was purely working on what I was interested in, which was muscles and bone. And it was funny because I show up and there's nobody in the school because it's a holiday. I was expecting to be in a class with other people, and I get there and the lab monitor comes in, and she's a student and knows her shit. She knows the lab backwards and forwards, and I've never been in an anatomy lab before, and I'm all nervous. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? And she's all like, well, just pick somebody and start. I'm like, how do I start? She's like, oh, you need the manual. I was like, there's a manual? And she reaches up on the shelf and pulls down this spiral-bound book called Grant's Dissector. And Grant's Dissector is the manual for doing cadaver lab. It tells you how to deglove a limb, how to take the skin off, how to detach muscles, how to get to the parts that you're trying to get to. And boy, it was an experience. And it was funny because very, very quickly, and she left. She gave me a scalpel. I knew how to change a scalpel, more or less, but she gave me a rundown on how to use the scalpels. And then she left. She's like, leave the thing up in the office. And then very, very quickly, I had to sort of get over the idea of taboo. Because you're sitting there and you're like, you can't quite divorce yourself from the fact that, it's a body. And technically, it's not something that you're supposed to do, but you have permission to do it. You're in a school, obviously you're allowed to do it, but there's this big taboo that's in your head. And I was doing it alone. So I was expecting to be in a classroom, and medical students typically have the benefit of processing their feelings about anatomy lab in a group of their peers. I didn't have that. There were no peers. There was nobody there. I was there doing it alone. And after I was there for I think a week and a half, and I flew back to San Francisco. I was living in San Francisco at the time. I flew back to San Francisco, and I was in the drive-thru at McDonald's or something getting a quick lunch, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just started crying because I just had compartmentalized the humanity of it, as you have to do, as medical students do. You have to compartmentalize the humanity outside of yourself while you're doing it. And then at some point, you have to kind of process it. You have to come to terms with it and be like, okay, well, this is a person. So it was really intense, an amazing experience. And I think if most of you reached out to an anatomy lab, you would probably end up doing it in a classroom situation with other people. I was doing it through a company that had arranged it for me because I was doing anatomy products for them. And that was how it ended up being such a unique situation. But yeah, it was crazy. It was just such an experience, one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Because I've always been sort of fascinated with the artists that came before us that risked death to study anatomy. Because Michelangelo and Leonardo, they were risking the Inquisition by studying anatomy. It was illegal. They weren't allowed to do it. And, you know, there's all sorts of taboos tied up into it. And so it's an amazing thing to have the opportunity to study and do. I love anatomy. Anatomy is one of those things. I always say that anatomy is amazing. I'm taking the nasolabial fold, by the way, and I'm tugging it down. I want to give some gravity to it and have it overlap this bit of flesh next to it. So I'm just trying to give it a sense of gravity here. I'm going to take the inflate brush and run the inflate brush next to it here. There we go. And I'll do the same thing over on this side. I just want to give it a sense of gravity. Invert that mask. I might step down to subdivision level and control-click to feather that mask. And then I'll just run my standard brush along the bottom just to give it that sense of sagging skin. So I was saying that I love anatomy because, and I tell my students in my classes, anatomy is wonderful because it is a pure journey. It's not something you'll ever master. If you ever meet somebody that says they've mastered anatomy, they're a jerk. Get away from them. Nobody introduces themselves as a master of anatomy. Most artists wouldn't introduce themselves as a master artist. The best artists that I've ever known are rather, you know, dubious of their own abilities. They don't recognize their own genius, their own amazing qualities. And the artists that I've met that are really confident that they're awesome, I know confident artists who are really great people, but artists that are really confident that they're the best are usually real dicks. Sorry. They're not pleasant because you know your limits. You know not your limits. You know, the thing is, you need to know how much you don't know. You need to be able to see how far you have to go. And if you're so busy looking at where you are and being like, I am so awesome, look at this mountain I'm on top of. You're on top of a hill and you're completely missing everything else there is to learn. And anatomy is one of these beautiful things because you can study it for your entire life. You'll never master it. And it's always about the journey. Because so much in our lives is typically about getting there. We're always about getting there. It's always about, you know, accomplishing this or finishing this or doing this. And anatomy is something that you just experience and learn nonstop throughout your study of it. And that really appeals to me. It's like violin. I love violin because unless you are, you know, groomed from a very young age that you're going to be a master, the violin is a journey. And it's something that you can just enjoy as a journey. And I feel that way about anatomy too. It's a journey. Not to sound hokey. So I'm doing that thing still where I'm taking the Dan Standard brush and sort of sketching a round form. Just giving myself a little sense of the skin here. Arg. Grr. Let's check the chat box. Ducks. Ducks. Learn every day and you'll never know everything. That's right. Should I start learning with a mouse or should I invest in a tablet? You can get an inexpensive tablet. You don't have to get the top of the line tablet. Get some kind of Intuos tablet. You can work with a mouse, and I know of a couple of amazing sculptors who use the mouse, but I think a tablet will really help you and you don't have to spend a ton of money on it. You don't have to get the Intuos for it. You don't have to get a Cintiq. You can get a cheaper, you can get a cheaper tablet. Thanks, Nick. Grim Tea Reaper. Yep, Wacom tablet. Thank you. Cool. Broke. Friend borrowed my Cintiq. It's a cheap, good tablet. Yeah, can someone recommend? I'm not sure off the top of my head. I've gone and taught classes where they bought the less expensive Wacom. I think it was like a Bamboo or something. As long as it's got it's got 1024 levels of sensitivity, I think you'll be fine. So you want to make sure that it's got that feature. So I'm going to go to the standard brush, turn on asymmetry, and I'm going to run just along the temporal ridge here. I'm just building up that. I just want to give that sense of there being a bit of a ridge there. That's all. And I'll do another ridge here. I've really neglected the back here. I haven't been thinking about the back at all. That's very bad of me. That's very not good. Not good, Maddie. So I'm just going to do a little bit of sketching here. I'm going to take the tubes brush and build up the bottom portion of the latissimus dorsi here. Got that spine. And I'm going to go to the clay tubes brush, and I'm going to go to that alpha 58 again, and I'm going to bring these raised wrinkles. I'm going to turn down my Z intensity and bring these raised wrinkles across the neck here. Turn off my asymmetry. I'm just going to run these wrinkles across the neck under here. Giving a little bit of texture to the back of the head here. And I'll smooth this back. Just kind of trying to break things up a little bit. Fun. And let's save our work. I'm superstitious, so I'm going to skip to the number 14. Let's zoom in here. I'm going to do a couple little bits with the move brush and accurate curve mode. So I just want to bring some little spiny bits here. There we go. Oops, I didn't do it on the other side. Now, I wouldn't mind those being symmetrical, so what I'll do is I'm going to step down my subdivision levels. I'm going to turn off X-symmetry. Well, X-symmetry is turned off. I'm going to mask, actually no, because I've got other asymmetrical elements here, so scratch that. I was going to mirror it, but if I do that, then it'll mirror everything. There's ways to get around that, but I'll just come in here and do it manually. I'm just being lazy at this point because I'm getting hoarse. There we go. I like those. These are cute. Don't need to be quite so pronounced. You know what? Actually, I'm going to show you a trick. Watch this. I'm at my top subdivision level. I'm going to go to Geometry. I'm going to go to my top subdivision level right here. Now I want to mirror over just these parts, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Morph Target, and I'm going to store Morph Target. That stores a copy of my mesh in memory. Now I had other elements in this space which are asymmetrical, so I don't want to completely mirror one side over, because that's going to ruin all my asymmetry. I just want to mirror those little spines at the top. So watch this. I'm going to go to Geometry, I'm going to go to Deformation, Smart Reset, and it's going to copy over that side. But look how it changes all that stuff in the face. I'm going to go to Smart Resim again. Each time I step up a subdivision level, I'm going to Smart Resim it. Now don't step all the way up to top level and then Smart Resim, because it's too many subdivision levels for it to deal with. Do it one at a time, stepping out. So let's step up another subdivision level and Smart Resim. You see it's starting to bring those elements back. There we go, and we'll step up to a high subdivision level. So now we've got those bits copied over, but, oops, the problem is it is gone and it's made my face totally symmetrical. So if I go back to Morph Target and switch, you can see how much changes in the face. I prefer my asymmetrical face. So I'm going to switch Morph Target so my face is asymmetrical again. But in my stored version of the morph target, I've got this spike. So I'll go to B for brush, M for morph, and I'll select the morph brush here. Turn up my intensity, and then I'll just morph this area in. And look what it does. It brings in just that area. So I keep the asymmetry in my face without ruining the symmetry of those little spiny bits. Cool. Alright, let's save our work again. I hadn't planned on painting, but I'll put a little bit of color on. So I'm going to start by grabbing kind of a nice base color. Now we'll go to RGB, color, fill object. So I've just filled the object with a nice base tone. I'm going to go to my material settings. I'm going to change my material. I'm going to go to modifiers, and I'm going to go to diffuse, and I'm going to turn diffuse up so I can see my color a bit better. I'm going to go to specular, and I'm going to broaden the specular curve so it's more like the specular element of skin. And I'm going to turn the specular strength down so it feels more skin-like. Okay, so once I've got a base color in there, I'm going to go to the color red, and I'm going to turn off Z-Add, make sure I'm on the standard brush, turn off Z-Add, turn on RGB. I'm going to go to a spray stroke, and I'm going to turn it into the dot alpha, and I'm going to go to my color modifier here and turn that all the way down. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint symmetrically, actually. I'm going to paint red dots into the areas that I want to be warmer, in this case the nose. I mean, I'll put red dots everywhere, but I'm going to cluster them into the nose and the cheeks and the ears, because temperature-wise those are going to appear to be warmer on someone with lighter skin. Let's bring some of this down into the body. I'm going to switch color, and I'm just going to grab the base color. That way I can spray that in and take away when the red is too much. There's a little bit of a delay on my brush because of the broadcast, so it's making it a bit tricky for me to get the nuance that I want with my pen pressure. So warm it back here. Okay. Now I'm going to go to blue, and I'm going to make that a cooler blue. And I'm going to spray blue into the eye sockets. I'm going to spray blue into the lips and the lower portion of the jaw here. Typically you'd have cooler colors down here if somebody has facial hair, or if they've got 5 o'clock shadow, it'll cool off the bottom portion of their face. So it's a good bet to put that in there. I mean, anybody's face is going to be cooler on the lower portion, but it's more pronounced if you've got hair follicles in there. I'm going to spray the blue into the recessed areas as well. I'm going to spray it into the little recessed areas of the neck here. The reason for that is cool color has a tendency to recede. It looks like it's moving away from us, and warm color looks like it's moving towards us. So that's kind of why you end up with like red cars getting speeding tickets more often, because they look like they're going faster. They look like they're coming out at you. So that's a little bit of color theory that's real handy. Let's go back to our red. This is a temperature map, by the way. This is not supposed to look real. This is an underpainting. This is going to be under several layers of paint later on. So the more overstated and pronounced this is, the better. Let's do a little bit of back there. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to select yellow. Yellow is one of those colors. It is really hard to work with. I had a bad experience with yellow gouache in art school, and I never recovered from it. Yellow is tricky. It's an amazing color. It's a very delicate color, and it can change your palette really quickly. It can go to mud really quickly, so you have to be really careful with it. I spray yellow into the ears. I spray it where the cheekbones are. I spray it into the beard area, and you notice how it starts to go green, where the red, where the yellow meets the blue. It starts to take on kind of a green hue. Spraying it into the chest here. There we go. While I'm at it, I'm going to switch over to the teeth, subtool teeth, and I'm going to fill these with this sort of off-white, yellowish color. Same for the eyes, color, fill object, and then we'll do interior. No, we won't do interior. All right, so going back to the head now, I'm going to change to a drag rectangle stroke, and I'm going to change to a green alpha, and I'm going to select the color white. The next thing that we're going to do is called a mottling pass, and this is just a bunch of squiggly lines. This is how you paint with an airbrush. I mean, if I was painting this as a mask or a prosthetic, I would paint this the exact same way. I mean, this is how I learned to paint before I ever touched a computer. This squiggle pass is really standard. People generally do this when they're painting prosthetics or painting a puppet, and it's to break up the skin. So anything white, the color white, it's not technically a color, but white neutralizes color, and it cools it off. So everything underneath this white squiggle is going to be neutralized and cooled. Everything in between is going to maintain its vibrancy and its saturation. So what happens is, as I start painting the base color back on top of this layer of squiggling, it helps create an interference pattern that gives the impression of translucency to the skin. So I'm just going to keep squiggling and squiggling. If I was doing this at work, I mean, I would manually squiggle here. I wouldn't use this alpha, but you know, it's 10 o'clock at night, and I've been talking, it's 10:30, and I've been talking a long time, and I'm sure people are tired of hearing me, so I'm going to squiggle with the alpha just to make it a little bit faster. Turning off asymmetry as I get closer to the center line of the head, because you don't want to make like those Rorschach ink blot type patterns there. It's very apparent that symmetry has been turned on if you do that. Turn on asymmetry again once we get away from the center line. And usually I make the squiggle patterns tighter towards the face and broader as you get away from the face. I love painting. Painting is one of my favorite things to do. I used to hate it because I didn't understand it and no one could explain it to me. And like I said earlier, I'm really passionate about education. I am an educator. I'm a ZBrush and painting and sculpting instructor. And I feel like if you can't explain how to do something, you don't really know how to do it. And so I love the idea of communicating the how and the why of something. And because as a student, I brought all of my enthusiasm, but a lot of times there were things people just didn't seem to be able to teach me, and that really frustrated me. And so I don't want other people to feel that way. And so if it's something I know how to do, I try and think about it and figure out why I'm doing what I do, which is also good for me, because teaching, you know, I learn from teaching all the time because I have to learn new things to teach. But also I learn why I do things, and it helps me recognize my bad habits and my mistakes. Because we all have go-to shapes that we really like to do, and go-to color palettes and things that we get a little lazy, and it's like, well, I'll just do that same sort of shape that I always do. And you know, being an instructor helps me recognize when I do those things, and it helps me try and break those habits. So I'm just bringing the squiggles down the chest. I'm letting them get bigger as we get further down the body, because that's not really the focal point. And then we'll do in the back here, bring some squiggles in here. Let's switch over to the chat box and just see what's going on. Hidden Ninja ZBrush techniques. The white I don't know about. Let me try that. Yeah, the white is really nice. It's basically everything up to this point. It has to be really overstated. If you don't overstate this, it's not going to work. It has to be, I call it the clown vomit pass. It should look like a clown got sick and vomited all over your work. Because if it's not overstated, you're not going to be able to see it through the next layers of paint. And if it's overstated, then it's going to peek through the next layers of paint and it's going to look great. You're going to be able to see the effect that we're going for. Let's come back up and move into the head here. Squiggle, 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 squiggle. Squiggle, 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 squiggle. Sound effects are important. Remember your sound effects. There we go. Okay, so we've laid in our base painting now. I'm going to go back to my red really quick, and I'm going to go back to my spray stroke, because I just want to make sure I get a little bit more red up here in these ridges. Okay. All right, now I'm going to take my base color again. So I'm just going to swing over here to the underside, and I'm going to grab the base tone. Excuse me. And I'm going to turn down my RGB intensity. And I'm just going to spray the base color back on top. Now, the idea is I don't want to obliterate everything I just did, but I want to push it down into the surface of the skin. I want to sink it down deeper into the paint job by spraying the base color back on top of it. So you'll see all those squiggles and all those colors start to sink into the painting. I'm going to turn on solo so we don't spray through the teeth. Now this is going to make things start to look chalky. It's going to make things lose their intensity, and that's fine. We expect that at this point. We're going to come back in with more layers in just a minute and bring some of that color and some of that depth back. And spray this over the back here. Got a really bad sunburn, look at that. He went to Key West, he was having orc summer break, and, you know, fell asleep out on the beach on his towel. Poor thing. Woke up with this awful sunburn. There you go. Alright, so we've pushed back some of this color. Now I'm going to go to a single dot alpha, and I'm going to select kind of a little dark freckly color. And this is my favorite part. I'm going to start spraying freckles into the paint job. Oops, I just added a subdivision level I didn't mean to. There we go. So I'm just putting freckles through here. This is where it really starts to come together for me, is putting these freckles down. I love this stage. Oh, also, I'm going to go to my materials now, and I'm ready to turn on my wax modifier. So I'm going to turn the wax strength up, and I'm going to go to render, render properties, and let's turn on wax preview. There we go. Now it starts to take on some translucency. And I'm going to go to red. I'm going to go back to my dots. Spray that red back into the nose here, into the cheeks. Oh, I should save my work, come to think of it. Same as 16. Bring some of those warm tones into the mouth here. Bring some of that base color back in. And then let's go back to our freckles. Go to our single little dot alpha. Bring these through here. And we'll go to a nice sort of purplish hue, bring that into the lip area here. Go to our dots again. We go to drag rectangle, go to those veins, and let's bring those. I like making the mouths of creatures look real nasty. Make sure asymmetry is turned off here. And we'll bring these veins into this mouth area. And let's turn the teeth back on. Let's go to our teeth here and get a nice sort of caramel sort of base color. Go back to our spray stroke. Dots. Turn down our RGB intensity. And let's sort of stain the base of the teeth here a little bit. Go to our deco brush. Make sure it's just RGB. And just streak some of that color up the teeth. And let's lighten this color. Go to our spray stroke. And then spray like a lighter hue up here at the tips of the teeth. And let's go to our eyes. And let's go to color, fill object. And let's solo those eyes. And let's go to our vein alpha. And let's grab a nice dark red. And let's just get some of that red into the eye. Turn up the RGB intensity. Oops, that was way too big. Here we go. Bring some of that red through here. Switch color. Go back to the dot alpha. There we go. And let's switch back to our burgundy here. Bring that into the corners of the nostrils, into the eye sockets. And I'm going to make a big dot pattern down the back. Set this to the drag rectangle stroke. I'm going to drag some of these dots along the back of the head here. I'm going to change the color of this light and make it cooler. And then I'm going to go to my main light, set that to about 1. And here. Okay. And there I think we're done. We can warm up the ears a bit. Warm those up more. You can keep going. You can always keep going. Let's grab the bass tone again. Spray that on the ears. And let's save our work. Oops, 187. Let's check our chat box here. Yes, I do use KeyShot to render, but I don't have KeyShot on this computer. Hey, thank you. Thank you, Corgazer. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Pro 4210. There is layering for polypaint. I just don't use layers. I don't paint in layers. Teeth an object with the gums. You can make the teeth one piece with the gums. I recommend making the teeth separate because it's better for rigging and animating if they're separate, in my opinion. And painting and materials, it's better if they're separate. Cool. Awesome. So I'm going to do something really quick. I'm going to go to Z plugin. I'm going to go to Transpose Master. T-pose mesh, because I want to give it just a slight turn to the head, because sitting there looking straight ahead is real boring, and we've got a little bit more time before I have to go to bed and get up for work tomorrow. So I'm going to mask the head out. I'm going to invert the mask, feather it. I'm going to go to Transpose Rotate, turn off the gizmo, and I'm going to draw a transpose line. I'm going to drag it right down, and oops, just messed it up. I'm going to drag it right into the center of the head. And basically put it right down the axis that I would rotate the head on. Rotate, and then turn off the X. There you go. I just want to give a slight little curve to the head. And you're saying you got my DVD in the stream. Oh, there's more in my DVD. There's lots more. Do a whole section just on Sculptors Pro mode. And real quickly, I'm just going to check and see what happens visually to me if I change the body size just a little bit. Undo. Redo. Yeah, I like that. Okay, now I'm going to Z plugin, T-pose sub T. And there we go. There's Cedric the monster. that is, I think, where I'm going to end this particular stream. So I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. I usually have to do much shorter demos in my classes, so I guess I don't know how long we went. It's 10:40, so we went, what, 2 hours, 40 minutes? So, yeah, so what I would say for those of you who are looking for sort of a takeaway is work loose, work quickly, be gestural, be free, and don't get caught up in one area. Don't get caught up in second-guessing yourself. Just don't get caught up in trying to preserve shapes. Don't freak out and think that you can't make changes to something. And yeah, and if you have any questions or if you want to keep in touch, I'm happy to answer emails. You can contact me at Maddiemonster.com. That's also my website, is Maddiemonster.com. It should be at the bottom of the screen right now, Maddiemonster.com. So thanks so much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks to the kind words in the chat, and hopefully I'll see you all next time. So have a good night. Pop back over to it. Yeah, speed comes from confidence and repetition. So once you know what you're trying to do, you can do it fast. It's just confidence that comes from repetition. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Kitsune. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'll stream as regularly as I can. I'm very busy with lots of projects, but yeah, I could probably fit in a stream a month, maybe more. We'll see, depending. Yeah, I'll be back for more. I'm really glad you guys enjoyed this. Thank you. Cool, cool. Awesome. Well, I'm off to cook some dinner and go to bed, so thanks again for coming, and I will talk to you soon. Now I have to figure out how to shut the stream off so you don't, like, I don't continually stream the rest of my life. You want to be adopted? I'll adopt you. How the hell do I turn it off? Oh, wait, okay, here we go. I think I do this. Bye.